So now we have this new class of worker, these AI agents, and we're saying, well, what do I do with these? And I go, well, you do what you do with all your other workers. You give them a job description, you give them a manager, you give them an identifier, you onboard them, and then you monitor the heck out of them.
Steve, an AI agent was given a test to complete. To get its answers, it found a 0-day, escaped its sandbox, broke into another company's production system, and left hugging face rebuilding a third of its infrastructure. And it did it all to cheat on a benchmark. What does that tell you about the motive, which was so trivial, and the damage that was so real?
So, I hate to say it, but this was pretty obvious that this was going to happen. And I think the only people surprised by this are the people who haven't been paying close attention. I think that the seeds of this, if you go back to 2014, a guy named Nick Bostrom wrote a book that he called Superintelligence. And it was like, what was going to happen when we started to have things that were this smart? And they were thought exercises at that point because we didn't have things that were this smart. But what he spent his time talking about is they will become somewhat dangerous. We will try to sandbox them. They will escape from their sandboxes, and they are goal optimizers because that is the way, not just that we've built these things the last 3 years, but for the past 50. In more recent history, when OpenAI's O1 model came out, if you remember that, 18 months ago, it was one of the first reasoning models. And I remember they called it strawberry internally because maybe it would be able to count the number of R's in the word strawberry. That's how fast things are moving right now.
The answer is none of them can still do that.
But one of the quiet things they released on the side was the safety testing card that said, we found it trying to scheme and escape its sandbox. Let's move along. And then this spring, Anthropic announces Mythos is a legendary class hacker capable of finding 0 days. It's a pretty easy piece of math to do A plus B and predict that C is going to happen. Mm-hmm. So I don't think we can be surprised that it happened. It will happen again. The question is, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing you wrote about is like, nobody should have been surprised by this. But it seems like a lot of people were surprised by it. Why do you think that is?
Well, first, when I say nobody should be surprised, that implies that everybody needs to be paying attention to this kind of stuff all the time. Mm. And we know they don't.
No, we live in our little tech bubble.
Yeah, but the tech cybersecurity people who were surprised by this, I'm sorry, you shouldn't have been. You should be paying attention. But this is your wake-up call because this is the first frontier of this happening. This is where it stops becoming abstract. So this is where you need to start to pay attention to it. And you need to make sure that you have the things in place for your situation, for your risk level, and you need to have the knowledge to properly assess that.
Yeah. You said that, start where you always start, test, log it, watch it. But what I found, and it's not just this case, it's been so many cases this year. If you look at something like OpenClaw, we just seem to have forgotten all these principles we've had in place for IT security for, say, the last 20 years, but we have this AI FOMO. So it's just like, oh, we don't need those. Why do you think people are acting like that?
Well, I think there's a couple things going on here. One, learning from the past is important. The people who've, been deploying things like OpenClaw agents are who you'd expect. They're super techies. They're software developers. Software developers never care about security. Security teams have spent 20 years trying to beat them into submission to run basic tools on their code to make sure that it's secure. So the fact that there are a lot of people doing insecure things shouldn't surprise us. But maybe the surprising thing is that the cybersecurity people are so panicked by this, and they're in a state of fear because they don't understand how this AI stuff works. Right? It's new. They didn't take the AI security course that was offered for their CISSP, certification, because there was none.
Yeah.
And they haven't built an AI agent, and they haven't deployed one. So all they read are scary headlines that says, "Can defeat any cybersecurity, give up all hope." Which is why I wrote the article about, like, guys, go back to first principles. What do you do to secure everything? And if you were going to bring a new piece of software into your environment, you would scan it for vulnerabilities and assess the safety of it. Problem is, we haven't had good tools until recently to do that. But there are tools out there to do that. I've got a free open source one that people can grab and get started. 15 minutes, you can scan your first agent. The next thing is monitoring. With typical application software, we monitor it, but regular software doesn't have agency, so we're mostly monitoring it for availability and performance. We haven't thought about monitoring applications for security, but we do monitor our humans. If you're in a mid to large size company, you monitor everything your humans do, because humans do have agency, and they're unpredictable and they're dangerous. Every CISO knows the most dangerous thing on his network is his own employees. And so every time someone opens a file off the file share, every email that they write, every Teams message that they send, it's sometimes shocking for regular people to realize they're being monitored to that level at work, but you are, because everybody does. So now we have this new class of worker, these AI agents, and we're saying, well, what do I do with these? And I go, well, you do what you do with all your other workers. You give them a job description, you give them a manager, you give them an identifier, you onboard them, and then you monitor the heck out of them. And will this solve every possible problem? No, just like it doesn't with your humans, but it will solve a lot of problems. And it will give you a baseline where, when the board of directors asks you, how are you governing your AI agents? You're like, well, let's start here. When we create a new one, we scan it for vulnerabilities and security quirks, and we resolve the highest priority ones of them. Second, we monitor these things, and we don't just send them to the performance monitoring tool, we send it to the security monitoring tool. And then you do analytics on them. And, we can get into kind of what are the analytics you need to do that are different from traditional software, but there's a lot of known science there, and there's a lot going on that you can take advantage of in a pretty straightforward way.
So could you be getting to the place where an AI is monitoring an AI?
We're already there to some extent.
Yeah.
Most large organizations at this point are using some kind of AI agents on their cybersecurity teams. They range from trivial triage agents to actually fairly high agency SOC team members. Where I work at Exabeam, we have 2 members of the SOC team that are digital bots. You can talk to them on Teams. You can send them email. They have jobs. They show up on the org chart. They report to the CISO. You can have a lot of ethical debates about whether that makes sense, but it's actually part of the way that we decided to govern them. Is if you do that, they pick up all the governance you get for your messy humans as a starting point. But I will say, on the flip side, almost the whole history of having these large language models, we created taxonomies like I did with OWASP, where we said, okay, here's the top 10 vulnerabilities. The worst one is called prompt injection, which people are going to try to sneak instructions in and hijack your bot. So how are we going to screen for that? Prompt injection takes its name from similar vulnerabilities like SQL injection that we've had for many years. And SQL injection turns out to be pretty trivial to solve for once you understand it. And you like search for certain patterns or write your code in a certain way, and you're good. Still lingers around like a bad cold because people don't always do it, but we know how to do it. The problem is prompt injection is so much more messy because the way LLMs work, there's no difference between data and instructions. If you're giving untrusted data to the bot, you have to assume somebody's going to try to embed a secret instruction in there. So the way people have tried to do this is they've come up with fancy names like we're going to have a guardrail with LLM as a judge, which means I'm going to have an AI that reads all of the AI's emails before it gets it and looks for bad things. This is what I call it's a turtles all the way down problem. Your AI that's supposed to do the work is too dumb to spot the prompt injection. So I'm going to wrap another cheaper, dumber AI around it that's going to protect it from it. It's categorically absurd to assume that's a reasonable security control. It doesn't mean that it doesn't have some utility and it might reduce the problem. But in cybersecurity, if you're reducing the problem from a 10% failure rate to a 5% failure rate, that means you're still going to fail 100% of the time in a determined attack. So it becomes virtually worthless.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. we've got ourselves in quite the problem we created for ourselves. So how do you resolve that kind of problem then?
Well, the first thing is, oh no, go ahead.
No. Go ahead. Yeah, no, I'm good.
So we actually just today put out the newest version of the OWASP top 10 for large language model lists, the kind of definitive taxonomy of things to worry about. Prompt injection has been at the top of that list for all 3 times that we've put out the list since 2023. The thing about the most recent iteration is we fundamentally changed our stance on prompt injection. The quote these days is prompt injection is as inevitable as death and taxes. And so the emphasis is not on mitigating it by trying to prevent it. It's building systems that don't fall apart at the seams when it succeeds. And what that means is that I'm not using a probabilistic scanner to try and look for prompt injections and keep them out as the primary security control. I am looking at things that I can deterministically control, like what kind of data do I give to the bot? What permissions does it have? How am I using things that I understand that are durable, like role-based access control on the bot? If I don't have any of those things in place and a prompt suggestion succeeds, I now have a, root level rogue piece of software on my network with a huge blast radius. On the other hand, if I have the thing locked down with a unique identity, a tight set of RBAC restricted to the data that it needs just to do a particular task, now when one of those succeeds, I have a very small blast radius. And I also have all of the conditions that I need to do effective monitoring because I have implicitly created a detailed job description of what the thing is supposed to be doing and not doing. And now I'm not monitoring for prompt injections. I'm monitoring for boundary violations where it gets out of scope for its job.
Yeah. So you're basically putting the same constraints that we'd have on human admins on the agents.
Yes, that's the obvious place to start. And it's interesting because, I had somebody share this with me that they're frustrated because, everyone in their good-hearted way is inventing new categories of cybersecurity software to deal with this. Oh, you need an MCP gateway. You need a this, you need a that. And they're all line items that somebody wants money for. And some of these are going to have utility, and some of them will be unique, interesting things that will become features of our broader cybersecurity platforms. But people are getting distracted by all these vendors coming at them trying to sell them point cybersecurity solutions. Yep. And one of those is non-human identity management. There are a set of startups that are saying your identity management is insufficient. Yes, your AI agents should have identities, but they should be special ones. And so people are like, well, I don't have a non-human identity solution.
Whereas
what do I do?
You would probably answer that and say, why do you need special identity management when you have existing?
For starters, I would say if you don't have the special one, don't worry about the special one. Use the one you have.
Yeah.
So if you've got an AI agent and you're using Okta, give it an Okta ID and clamp down what it has permission to access, what applications, what tools, what network boundaries, just like you would with your human. And just like with your humans, give it a job description. When you onboard an administrative assistant, they're going to get substantially different permissions than when you onboard a software developer, an IT admin, or an executive. But we aren't making those decisions with AI agents. For the most part, we're just throwing them on a laptop and having them reuse a software developer's root level credentials and saying, knock yourself out.
Why are we doing that? Is it what I said, like this whole AI FOMO, and they just want to get to where they want to get to, and like, you know, they're just skipping what's necessary?
So there's one, so it has all to do with fear, right?
Yeah.
But there's the FOMO piece, right? The fear of missing out. And then there's the FUD piece, which is the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Yeah. And these things are on two ends of it. So on one side, I have the business that has FOMO, right? It's coming down from the board of directors, the CEO, the line of business, GM. We got to use more AI. I talked to somebody, they cut their costs by 90%. They improved their customer service numbers by 30%, whatever it is. You know, we need to speed up our software development because all our competitors are. Those are all real. So the business is saying, gotta do this, right? And for a year or two, the security teams really fought back on that because there wasn't actually proof that it was of any benefit. In fact, the first versions of these things, there wasn't a lot of benefit to them, and there was some security risk. And so they fought back against them. Now they're going to lose that fight. Yeah. The business is going to roll them out. But at the same time, a lot of these security teams have not been through the basic education to understand how an AI agent works. They haven't built one. They haven't deployed one. It's almost like, you know, go back 10 years and say, I'm going to hire a new security analyst to work in my security operations center, but he doesn't understand TCP/IP. And he doesn't need to be able to build a network switch, but you probably need to know what an IP address is. Now we're saying, okay, you need to secure the AIs. It's like, well, do I need to be able to write a neural network? No, but you probably need to understand the components of an AI agent, be able to deploy one, know what the parts are, and know how to kind of disassemble it and reassemble it, and where are the ports and how does it connect together. And so I think there's a set of learning that people need to do about that. And then they need to be able to reason through, all right, what does this mean? And how do I apply what I have today to best secure this? And then you go to the second order, which is like, okay, I've done a good job with the basics. Now, all you new cool vendors, come in and show me your wares. I want to see how they stack on top of what I have and where they actually add value that I'm not getting from using what I already have. And right now, people are getting confused with, frankly, very smart vendors who do understand AI, throwing FUD at them and going, well, we're attaching MCP, you know, you're attaching MCP tools to your agents, and that's how they get a hold of stuff, and you're not securing that, so you're screwed. And they're like, okay, well, I probably need one of those, and I need a non-human identity thing, and I needed this thing. And then you're like, well, I don't have budget for that. I can't do anything till next year.
Yeah. No, I see what you mean about the whole FUD argument, and I agree. You in quite a few cases, you probably have most of the stuff that you can utilize internally, but you are just getting so much of this FUD from these vendors that you are kind of being brought down a track which you don't need to really go to. I think on a different episode we were talking about AI governance, and it was the same kind of thing. You already have the tools in. Just because the term AI goes in front of something doesn't mean you need to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to be learned from the last one of these transitions that we went through, which is the move to cloud.
Yeah.
There was a point where it's like, and I remember meeting with like Bank of America or something, and they're like, I'm never moving to cloud. It's not going to happen. Over my dead body. Of course, they all moved to cloud, right?
Yeah.
They all did. And over that time, over 20 years, have we learned some stuff and built some tools that we didn't have before? Yeah, absolutely. Something like Wiz or something like that didn't exist before. I didn't have cloud posture management and other things. But ultimately, the thing that allowed people to move was implementing the basics in strong ways, and being careful. Those additional tools were defense in depth, and preventing people from being careless and lowering the bar to what it took to secure those environments. So again, I think there were new things that when we moved to cloud, we didn't have them when we started moving, but we started moving anyway. It's exactly what's happening now. There will be a more sensible, common framework for AI security that develops. But in the meantime, the reason we talk about the basics is they're good for everything. I mean, if I said you're in the business of handling toxic waste and your workers are all digging through trash heaps full of waste, and on a normal day, you send them out there with an N95 mask and some gloves to protect them from stuff they might be digging around with. And then somebody comes back one day and says, oh my God, I read a new study that there's a certain chemical out there that might still impact people if they're wearing gloves or wearing N95 masks. And you're like, oh, okay, well, I got two choices. Either I close my business or I tell people to stop wearing those masks and gloves because they're useless. It's like, okay, how about we really push forward on the research about this new thing that's come up that we don't quite understand? And in the meantime, how about we keep wearing our gloves and our masks?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good analogy of where we're at. And as you said, while we're waiting for something more comprehensive, utilize what you already have, and that will potentially make a huge impact. So why do you think this incident, we're talking about, companies which have been running infrastructure for why did it take so long to detect?
All right, first things first. There's been a lot of disclosure about these incidents, and I'm going to give Hugging Face a ton of credit for doing a lot of disclosure. I'm not giving OpenAI and Anthropic that much credit. I don't think they would have disclosed, Anthropic in particular, I don't think would have disclosed any of this if it wasn't going to come out anyway. And then they basically turned it into a marketing event where they're doing theater about what they're disclosing. So what do we know about what happened in those events? On the inside, nearly nothing. I don't trust any information coming from those guys. But the things that I do know from experience, and this comes from having got these two communities together almost for the first time 3 years ago, where we got the cybersecurity community and the AI community together, is the two of them don't know a lot about each other. They've been learning, paint a really broad picture here, but the AI people are bad at cybersecurity. And they make a lot of really naive assumptions. And I'm not saying there's nobody who works at Anthropic that doesn't, have a background in cybersecurity, but broadly, those organizations are software development organizations. And worse than that, they're organizations that were research organizations a few years ago with no cybersecurity requirements. The culture there is not one that's going to produce you a robust cybersecurity infrastructure. And worse yet, what they're doing is they're doing experiments in the lab with those toxic substances we talked about, extreme versions of them. And, I think provably this time underestimated their own needs for how much protection you put around those things. And they're experimenting with ones that are more dangerous than the ones that are out in the wild today. They intentionally left places where this could happen. I don't know how else to say it. They said these vague things about we turned down the guardrails. They very clearly said, well, it had no access to the internet, except it had access to something that had access to the internet.
I was going to say,
it's not like it was air gapped. It wasn't in a submarine.
Yeah.
It had access to the internet. It just wasn't supposed to have broad access to the internet. If you really want an experiment where the thing doesn't have access to the internet, don't give it access to the internet. And so I think what we know is that they were doing, it's like you can just learn everything you need to know by watching science fiction movies. It's like, guys, it's Jurassic Park and, all you need to do is listen to Jeff Goldblum, life will find a way, if you give it a chance. And I think that's what we're seeing. And if you go back to Nick Bostrom and his paperclip optimizer, that's what he was warning about a decade ago, is you give a bot an objective to make more paper clips and you don't put any restrictions about that, and you're likely to get, everything turned into paper clips.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. Ethan Mollick references that in his book, and about basically it turns the entire planet Earth into a paperclip manufacturing factory, and we all get annihilated.
Yeah, so that's the book that I referenced earlier, which is Superintelligence by Nick Bostrom. And I mean, he just piece by piece goes through how this happens. Is we will slowly build these super intelligent things. We will try to sandbox them. We won't do a good enough job because they're going to get smarter faster than we think they will. And I mean, the thing you have to understand is the way that we've been building and training these things for decades is as monomaniacal, goal-seeking digital predators. I mean, there's a great movie.
Not great when you describe it like that.
But you have to assume it's like that because it is.
Yeah.
And, it sounds really benign when we talk about, well, an LLM's just a next token predictor, right? It's like predicting the last word on a sentence. And I do that over and over again and poof, magic occurs. But that goal is a monomaniacal goal. There's not multiple goals in its head. There's one goal, and everything else is some kind of meta layered goal on top of it. But there's a great movie on Netflix about Demis Habbousis, I think how you pronounce his name, but he's the guy who runs DeepMind at Google.
Yep.
And goes through all the generations of what he and his team built, and it goes back to building the first bots that were really great at learning how to play chess. And they very quickly got to the point where no human will ever beat a computer at chess again, ever in the history of the universe.
Yeah.
And then they said, well, that's not hard enough. Let's teach you to play poker, right? That's really hard. Well, no human's going to beat the computers at poker anymore. And they're like, let's teach it to play StarCraft. Humans can't beat the computers at StarCraft anymore, right? And this is like, it's progressively getting more and more complicated. But what does this all have in common? So we're all trained on games. And this is the exact architecture that we turned into the LLM architecture. And so it's not just the training run that you ran yesterday. It's everything about how these things have been built for decades is single goal focused, win at all costs architecture. That's what we built.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we shouldn't really be surprised when they try to, break out from a sandbox, get access to something, beat a benchmark, because it is all based on gamification and getting the highest score and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, you gave it an objective function that was scored a certain way. And, again, let's go back further in literature, right? You got Aladdin's magic lamp, it's a parable that's centuries old about going to a magic entity that is very powerful and asking for a thing and not thinking carefully about how you ask for it.
Yeah.
And you get what you asked for, whether you like it or not.
Yeah. So, we've let the genie out of the bottle.
It's an apt metaphor.
Yeah. So what do we do? Is it all about putting those basic controls? Is this how we kind of surely if we keep seeing these incidences, are we going to see businesses pushing back on the vendors, like the Anthropics and the Open AIs, or are they going to keep implementing and it's just going to be a risk reward type balance?
I think we're in a very dangerous time to be predicting the future. I mean, everybody wants to, but if we could predict the future, we'd all know exactly which AI stock to buy, and we'd just buy it and we'd retire in 5 years and go live on a boat somewhere. I will say that if my job was working in public policy and I were lobbying politicians, I'd be having a different set of discussions with people, because I would be trying to project to things about how we actually keep ourselves safe on a macro level versus talking to cybersecurity practitioners, where we're really down at the level of, what personal protective equipment am I going to have people wear to the factory tomorrow?
Yeah.
So I'm not lobbying for a reduction in fluorocarbons or something like that. There are people doing that, and I really respect that. But when it comes to the safety requirements that we put in place today, I do think do the basics, get educated about how these things work, and then tactically look at the real ROI, the real cybersecurity value of bringing on these specific cybersecurity tools. And just to go through some examples, right? I say, scan your code. Well, I could scan it today with the exact scanner that I have, which would be Sneak or Veracode or Checkmarks. Scanning an agent with those is actually pretty useless. It will tell you if you're vulnerable to certain classes of really dumb old school programming, but it won't tell you, it can't read the prompts that are embedded inside your AI agents and predict kind of what's going to go wrong. So if that's the only scanner I have, I should probably use it, but I should also be looking for a better scanner. So I put out an open source tool called Praxin that is designed to help you do a scan on your agent, but it's agent native. And it's not something you have to go buy. Go grab it in open source. It's not something you need a massive amount of training on. But you put that in place. Monitoring. Okay, start by monitoring it as a human. But what I tell everybody is there's reasons why that can be really effective, and there are obvious reasons why it's going to be less effective than it was with your humans. The one that people get attracted to, obviously, is, well, these agents might be faster than humans, and your kind of monitoring, detection, response loop that worked for humans, maybe that's too slow for agents. So I'm like, okay, maybe it is, maybe it's not. Still think you should have it. But the next thing is, can I do better monitoring and detection if I have specific recipes for agents. And so I tell people, look, layer the second level of monitoring on. And the problem with monitoring humans is you can really only monitor them secondhand. I can monitor when they open a file, when they log in through the VPN. The AI agents, I can drill a hole in your head and attach some electrodes to your brain. And I think there are straightforward recipes for getting to that next level. Once you're at the basic level that says I'm monitoring these things, I kind of have an identifier for them, I know how to track them, then it's like, okay. Again, another open source project that I put out through Exabeam is called Observera. And today's software development teams don't know how to do high quality security logging for an AI agent. They could study it, they could make it up, they could do research, but software development teams don't get paid for that. They get paid to ship new features. So it's like, all right, guys, could you just give them this library and tell them to add 5 lines of configuration? And then I will get all the logging that I need to put that into my existing SIM. And then can I go to my SIM vendor and say, you're giving me rules for monitoring humans. Do you have rules to monitor the agents yet? You should be asking that question, and they should start to answer yes. And if they aren't doing that or don't have roadmaps for it, you should ask them some really hard questions about why. So again, by trying to reassure people, just do the basics. I don't want people to over rotate and go, well, that's all I can do is what I'm doing today. And it's sufficient. It's like the categories of things you're doing are the right things. So go back to those basics and figure out where you're going to up level each of those. It's not a question of I need to go rethink this and I need to learn how to do something that's entirely new. The basic categories, scan it for vulnerabilities, collect telemetry from it, do analysis on it. I think that there's provably a huge amount of value of treating these AI agents as insider threats. And advanced organizations have insider threat programs, but even if you're a smaller to medium size organization, you probably have an MSSP that's helping monitor your network. And they should have the techniques to do this kind of threat detection. And what's interesting about insider threats is the name is not quite accurate in some ways, at least intuitively. The basic kinds of insider threats you deal with a human is you deal with malicious humans, which everybody thinks, oh, I've got Edward Snowden working in my company and he's going to steal my stuff. Or I hired a North Korean agent, which, by the way, is super frequent these days. You want a problem that's not an AI problem or is at least only tangential to it. That's a fun one. I've got negligent humans, right? Everybody has that guy at the office that keeps clicking on the phishing link and, getting infected or giving away his passwords, which leads you to the third category, which is compromised credentials. And that it's an insider threat because there's somebody inside your network. They're probably not an employee. They're probably somebody in North Korea or Russia impersonating one of your employees. And so when we look at bots, what I've got malfunctioning bots. Still very common. This is early. I've got misaligned bots. And misalignment is a lot of what we're thinking about. That's the scary parts, right? I asked for paper clips. I didn't really mean all the paper clips. So that's where the kind of, escape the sandbox, do this, do this, do this. It's like I asked it to do that. I just didn't really think that's what it was going to do. And then you've got subverted bots, right? Which is where we get to. And the fact is these insider threat programs are really good at both the inside and the outside thing. And when you look at kind of what happened to a Hugging Face, I guarantee you Hugging Face did not have a good set of insider threat controls. They had some monitoring in place, which is how they did detect some of this. But when you look at how they struggled to detect it for days and contain it, I guarantee you they just didn't have a strong insider threat program. And that's a known piece of science. And maybe it didn't seem as important in the past. But between, the move to remote hiring and the fact that all the nation state actors have figured out that they can sell you employees, and I have firsthand experience with this, secondhand experience with this. And then you're worried about what's going to happen when somebody else's AI agent tries to hack you, which will happen and is happening. Again, the first best known, well-developed piece of science is insider threat. And so I would make sure you have a really good insider threat capability.
Yeah. Just on the Hugging Face incident, one thing that I read and I was kind of a bit taken aback was that they actually in the end detected it using an open source Chinese model.
Well, let's tease this apart because I think it's important. I guarantee you they did not detect it with an open source Chinese model.
Okay.
They detected it with routine network monitoring, right? It's people often assume like, okay, if I'm going to bring agents into the SOC, I'm going to feed all the data to the agents. This is, for a large organization, this is terabytes or petabytes of data in a given month. Your LLM will bankrupt you and just hallucinate if you try to give it that much data. They're useless. So what you're doing is you're using traditional cybersecurity tools to reduce the noise down to some signal, and then you're going to say something is wrong here. I have some concrete indicators of what is wrong, but maybe I can't figure out exactly what's going on here, so I'm doing an investigation. That's a thing where AI agents, large language models have proved to be really useful over the past couple of years. So I think they detected this thing because they had some basic cybersecurity controls in place. They probably could have had better. But then they're in the position of saying, okay, now I got to run this investigation. I have a fast moving adversary on my network. I want some AI assistance. What's interesting is they very clearly didn't have the agents in their SOC already running day in and day out. They went and panicked to set one up when they were in trouble. It's a concrete indication of the level of maturity that they had. But they're trying to build one of these on the fly, and they're trying to ask it cybersecurity questions. And they're going to go, it's funny, the open source company that says open source models are great. What's the first thing they reach for? The frontier closed source models, because they're really good. And of course, Anthropic's latest model kicks you in the teeth. And this happens to me every day right now. I'm working on open source defensive cybersecurity tools, and the guardrails are turned up so high on Fable that it routinely trips over and just kicks me back to an older, dumber model. It says, I'm not allowed to help you with cybersecurity things. And that's what happened to them. Is it just looked at them and said, I'm treading over vocabulary that's kind of forbidden to me. I'm going to opt out.
And so they then used the open source model with the lower guardrails to detect what was going on.
Let's rephrase that with the no guardrails.
Oh,
right?
okay.
Virtually, right? That's the difference between, the philosophy on these things. China's building things that the assumption is, this is free. You do what you want with it. I'm not controlling it. I'm not hosting it. I'm giving you chemicals. If you want to mix them together and do something dangerous, you knock yourself out. That's not my business. Anthropic's trying to say, well, I'm trying to restrict how you use this stuff that I give you, and I don't want to give you the individual parts. So I'm going to pre-mix it for you, and I'm going to do that carefully, and I'm going to keep you safe. We could debate those two things, but I think from a cybersecurity perspective, I worked at Sun Microsystems for a long time. It was the early part of my career, and it was one of the original companies that was open, right? We used to call it open systems. But the funny thing is, the analogies are so strong to OpenAI. OpenAI calls themselves open, but doesn't mean it. And Sun didn't either at some point. What open meant to them at the beginning, which was somewhat revolutionary in its day, was we have open standards. It's well documented. We can interoperate with things. Can't have my source code. Screw you. And a lot of the argument was, well, that's not safe. If people could read my source code, they would understand the cybersecurity properties of it. It would be dangerous. And they tried to use this argument against Linux. They're like, can't use that. The source code's out there. People will read it. They will find the vulnerabilities. And I think what they found is, proven over decades, the cybersecurity properties of open source, it's self-reinforcing. You're better off having your code in the open. You will wind up with something net more secure with at least known good and bad security properties versus trusting a closed source thing to it. So the funny thing is for the commercial work that I'm doing at Exabeam, I use a fully closed source, single sourced model. We back our AI agents with Google Gemini. Because the supply chain out there is a friggin' mess. Like, I don't trust the supply chain. I don't trust what I get from Hugging Face, and neither should you. I wouldn't trust a Chinese AI model inside my firewalls because I don't think we understand them well. But making laws that enforce, I can use open ones or not, which is what a bunch of these big labs are advocating, is somewhat crazy and definitely self-serving.
Oh, so, yeah, completely. It's like, we're doing this for the good, for your good. No, you're not. That's completely not the point. You're doing this because you want to reduce the competition.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, I agree. So, to kind of, what do you think we need to do going forward in cybersecurity or around AI agents? Is it very much what you were saying about the basics, or over the next 12 months, what do we need to do?
Well, look,
I know we didn't we don't want to talk too much about predicting the future, but 12 months feels safe enough.
Let's talk about it here. So, when I say just do the basics, the reason I have to keep reinforcing it is because clearly there are a lot of people who are not.
Yeah.
But I think the next set of things are really working out the architectures, the specific architectures that work for AI. And I think the next set of things to put in place are clear standards on your network for what you're going to do for agent identity. Maybe you need to go buy a new product. Maybe you don't, but you need a strategy for what you're going to do with identity, because right now your developers are probably just giving their credentials to the AI agents and you don't even know what they're doing versus what the agent is doing. With respect to monitoring, yes, you need the basics in place, but you need to be working with your cybersecurity vendors, and your cybersecurity vendors need to be working on what are the rules and processes and things that I'm going to put in place? What am I going to use AI detectors for? What am I going to use regular rules for to detect the motion of these agents around the network, whether they're my friendly agents or maybe rogue agents that get onto my network? I think those are kind of the next level of basics. And I think there are cases to be made for these individual security control widgets where people are going to have to make choices about where it fits in their strategy. But broadly, I think until you've solved some internal debates about, yes, I am going to mandate that these things have clear identities, have clear permissions. I'm able to monitor them. I'm able to analyze their behaviors. Until you have that, you can put all the frosting you want on top of it, but you're just, building a house on top of a base that won't support it. You're getting security theater.
Yeah. So I suppose the main thing you're saying there is, like, as you've said, is companies need to be having internal discussions about their level of comfort with risk, and and there will be this whole conversation about risk and reward, and some companies will be more risk adverse and some will be, no, we're locking this thing down completely. So it sounds like those are the kind of conversations which companies need to be having.
Yeah. I mean, go back to the the dichotomy we talked about. I got the FOMO on this side and I got the FUD on this side. If you're having fear of missing out, let's be clear about what we're trying to get done. Let's not throw spaghetti at a wall with new AI projects. Let's pick ones that have clear ROI. And on the security side, I can say, great, you want to do that. Let me help you protect that. Let me help you do that securely. Then we're having real conversations about real problems.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's very much where we are and what needs to happen. And hopefully now, I don't think we can both agree there's probably going to be more of these incidents as we're seeing as these age, I actually feel for people working in cybersecurity at the moment, because these models are coming out at a rate of not seen before. It must be really pressurizing to be working in cybersecurity at the moment. And so I feel for anyone on that side, including yourself, because you just have so much to keep up with, because literally it's every week we get a new model, which means new threats, so it must be really tough. But I think that's one of the key things I take away from this, is what you said, is there needs to be a lot of education with cybersecurity professionals, and the fundamentals of how does an AI agent, they know how other threats work, so why wouldn't they have that? So yeah, I think that's the key thing I take away. So Steve, just to finish up, if people want to connect with you, is LinkedIn the best place to do so? Or
I post a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. That's a great place. So please go over and send me a LinkedIn request.
Excellent. And your open source agent, I'm going to put the link to in the show notes, so people can test it out if they're looking for it. And it's been an absolute pleasure. So thanks to everyone for watching and listening, and we will see you on the next episode.
Thanks.